So in this presentation, we are going to consider what is jQuery. So first of all, we understand what exactly the jQuery is. A popular JavaScript library. It covers what jQuery is, why it is useful, and the basic operations such as selecting element, changing styles, creating and removing the element, and handling the user events. Basically, this concept helps in building the interactive and dynamic web pages. First, let's understand the introduction to jQuery. So jQuery is a fast and lightweight JavaScript library which is developed by John Resig at Rostal Institute of Technology, which is used in the development, or you can consider emphasize the interaction between the JavaScript and HTML. It was released in January 2006 at Barcamp NYC by John Resig. jQuery is a free open source software dual license under the MIT license and the GNU public license. So let's understand what is jQuery is and why we require to learn this jQuery. So as we know that jQuery is a fast and lightweight JavaScript library that simplifies complex JavaScript tasks. It also considers that allows developers to write fewer line of code to perform the common operations like DOM manipulation, and we can consider the animation here and event handling. So jQuery works consistently across all the different browsers, where most of the times you will get the question over here that what is jQuery is. So that time you can able to answer this part where jQuery is a lightweight JavaScript library that simplifies the DOM manipulation and event handling. So basically we are considering the Ajax interaction for rapid web development. You will get the jQuery at jQuery.com. Now let's understand why to learn the jQuery. So learning the jQuery is a beneficial because it reduces the complexity of JavaScript program. It makes web development faster and easier, especially for the beginners, where we have to consider here the jQuery handles cross cross-browser issue and provides built-in method for animations, effects, and user interactions, and which is save the development time. So you have to consider here what exactly we can do here, write less and do more, which I consider for the getting the more faster and easier so we can get the performance. We require some plugins to add, and it's standards we have to consider here, and that's why we are learning the jQuery. So most of the times we will consider here question. We learn this particular what is exactly the online Viva consider here that jQuery reduces the complex JavaScript code and makes web pages interactive with minimal efforts. So jQuery library consists of the following features, which is consist of HTML or DOM manipulation, CSS manipulation, HTML event method, effects and animations, Ajax, and utilities. So here, jQuery, or what jQuery does. Basically, if I want to consider this point, then it is used to separate the behavior from the structure. Then we have to consider the CSS, which is used to separation of style from the structure, allowing the adding JavaScript to your web pages, where we can get the advantage over the JavaScript, which is considered much more easier to use and eliminates the cross browser platform. So it's considered that we can consider HTML to CSS to DHTML, dynamic HTML. So let's understand how to load a particular jQuery. Loading a jQuery is the most important aspect in this particular concern. So jQuery can be loaded into two ways, basically. In a particular DOM, we cannot use a DOM before they have been constructed. So jQuery gives us a more compatible way to do this. One is considered as a DOM way, and another is considered as a direct jQuery translation. So we have to consider a DOM way where we can use the function onload is equal to function windows.onload. And here we are considering the direct jQuery translator to do the stuff by the DOM where we can use the ready function. And the last one is called as a jQuery base. So where we can use the dollar function. So in this, we have to consider the aspects of DOM and jQuery. So identification, traversal, node manipulation, and tree manipulation are the most important concept to understand under the DOM and jQuery. So identification is nothing but how do I obtain a reference to the node that I want to perform. Traversal is basically the way we can able to go move around the DOM tree. Mode manipulation is how to do I get and as a particular aspects of the DOM node. And tree manipulation is considered here the how do I change the structure of the web page. So basically, we have to consider the most important part where the who are the biggest companies or how many biggest companies are using now jQuery for using a particular web page. So Google, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, Twitter, and Dell are the examples I have listed here for the particular consideration of the using a particular jQuery for creating a web page. Now let's understand the selecting the groups of DOM objects. So basically, before considering this particular selecting object, we have to understand how we can load the jQuery. So loading the jQuery, we have to consider the CDN method and another one is called as a local method. So basically, jQuery can be loaded using an online CDN link by the downloading or by the downloading the particular linking to a local file. So jQuery must be loaded before writing any jQuery code. So here we are considering the selecting of the objects for a particular DOM. Then we have to consider this point. So as we know that get element by ID, it is to be used for return the area of descendant with the given tag such as div. Get element by tag name, which returns the area of descendant which the given tag such as div. Get element by name, get selector query, and all the query selector all. So these are all as objects we can the DOM objects we can able to select by this method. Let's understand this particular point where we have to consider jQuery node identification. So when we are going to consider this node identification, then we have to consider the selecting the elements. So in that we have to use the CSS selector in which we have to consider the dollar sign and then afterward the name of the selector will become. So group selector, we are consider ID selector, context selector, complex selector. So these are considered as a jQuery select HTML element using CSS selector like tag, ID, and class. So the dollar and then afterward this function we represent is used to access the element for manipulation. So basically the CSS method in jQuery is used to change the style of HTML elements dynamically. It allows developer to modify property like color, font size, and background without reloading the page. So multiple CSS properties can be also be applied at the same time. In this, we have to consider the changing style in which we have to consider the most important point that CSS method is used to change the style like color. So in this, we have to consider the jQuery or DOM comparison, where DOM methods, we have to understand what is the equivalent to the jQuery, we have to understand that part. So DOM method, if you can consider get element by ID, then jQuery, we can write here dollar and then afterwards function, or you can consider method hash ID like that. So in that, we have to represent the element by ID. If I want to consider element by tag name, then we have to consider dollar and in the double quotes, we have to provide the tags. Then afterwards, div element, get element by name. We can write here by with the help of dollar, and in that we have to use opening braces. Then afterwards, double quotes, and in parentheses, we have to use name is equal to, and then whichever the name we have to specify that we can write. And the query selector and query selector also. These are the representation of DOM, which is equivalent to the jQuery. So let's understand the jQuery terminology. So basically, we have to consider the jQuery function, which refers to the global jQuery object, or we can consider dollar function depending on the context. Then jQuery object, as we know that we are using the object-oriented features of JavaScript. So the object written by the jQuery function that often represents a group of elements, and the last one is selected element. So the DOM elements that can you have selected for most likely to by the CSS selector passed to the jQuery function and possibly later the filter the further. So which is to be used for the consideration of jQuery function, object and element. Let's understand the jQuery object. So in this, we have to consider that we dollar sign function, which always be used even for the ID selector, or we can use the name. We are using the returns as an array like object, which is called a jQuery object. Then jQuery object wraps the originally selected DOM object. Then you can access actual DOM object by accessing the element of the jQuery object. So let's understand this, which is to be used for the jQuery. Using a dollar as a wrapper part. So we have to consider the dollar adds extra functionality to the DOM element where you can passing an existing DOM object to dollar and it will be get the jQuery upgrade. So we have to consider the creating the elements, which is dynamically element creation and which is improve the interactivity. So in this jQuery allows us to create a new HTML element dynamically. These elements can be added to web page during the runtime. Then afterward, jQuery can consider to give the identical way to the contextual element identification, where we can consider this point where the element are creating an element is to be considered here, where jQuery allows developers to create new element dynamically using JavaScript. And these elements can be created as an object and the latter inserted into the document. So this feature is useful for building a dynamic context such as pop-ups, notification, and new form fields. Like that, we can able to perform that. Then afterwards, we have to consider we are traversing the DOM tree. So we have to consider traversing is we always be considered from child to node, which is to be considered first child, last child. So that is considered the first is the start or end of this node list of a particular children. We have to consider child node is basically the array of all these nodes children. Then next sibling, previous sibling, where we have to consider the neighboring nodes with the same parent, and parent node we have to consider here the element that contains this particular node. So we have to consider the jQuery which provides particular point where we have to consider select DOM, which is nothing but elements on a page, the one element or a group of element. We have to consider that point. Then afterwards we have to set the properties of the DOM element. Then in this group, we have to consider the find something to do something for a particular operation, creates, deletes, shows and hide the DOM element, and define the events behavior, which is to be given for the clicking on a particular part or particular, if I consider the mouse event, and that we can consider the mouse movement, dynamic styling, animation, dynamic context like that, which is comes under the event behavior, and the last one is Ajax call. So basically, a DOM is nothing but document object model. We all know that part. So jQuery is a DOM scripting, which is the hierarchical structure of a web page, and we can able to add and subtract the element on a particular way very easily. You can change the properties and the context, or you can content of a particular DOM element very easily. So as we know that what is DOM, that is nothing but is a consider here the HTML document object model where we can add the code, where we can consider doc type, and to the HTML we are adding that particular code, and the DOM is loaded top up to bottom. So it is considered hierarchy from top to bottom. So include your script at the bottom of the page for the best performance. So DOM is ready when everything on the pages has to be loaded, and it is considered some scripting part. So it is considered style sheet, JavaScript, and images if you want to add. So in this, we have to consider DOM as cross-platform and language-independent convention for representing and interacting with objects in HTML, or you can consider XHTML or XML document, where the most important part is considered as a element. We can consider the aspect of DOM may be addressed and manipulated within the structure of the programming language which is to be used. So here the simplest way we can consider the node tree in that we can consider document, then HTML. In the HTML we are having head and body. In the body we are having paragraph, and this is considered that this is the paragraph, and we have to use that in a body clause and HTML clause. So adding the jQuery to your web page, we have to consider uh, two approaches which is to be considered here. So one is we are considering here the particular point where we can use the CDN method, and another is called as a local file method. So basically jQuery can be loaded in a two ways using CDN and local file. CDN loading is faster and commonly used in production of a particular website, while local loading is useful when internet access is not there, or we can consider not availability of the internet, then we can use the local access. So jQuery must be loaded before writing any jQuery code. So downloading jQuery, we have to consider here production version and development version. So in the production version, we have to consider this particular point where the live website we have to use in which minified and the compressed way we have to consider here. Development version is this is for testing and development part, where we can consider these two approaches can be able to download in from the jQuery.com. This is the simplest way I can add here in a head, in a script SRC, we can add the particular jQuery, which is the, you can consider the 3.6.0, and then we have to use the .min.js. So basically this is the place the download file in the same directory as the page where you wish to use it. The most important aspect. So if you don't want to download and the host the jQuery yourself, then you include the CDN, which is called as a content delivery network, which is to be mostly used by the Google and Microsoft who are using the jQuery. So to use the jQuery from the Google or Microsoft, we have to consider this part. So in a head, if a Google CDN, we are to using this part, and for Microsoft CDN, we are using this particular source. So one big advantage of using the hosted jQuery from the Google and Microsoft is that many users already have downloaded the jQuery from the Google and the Microsoft when visiting to the another site. So as a result, it will be loaded from the cache when they visit your site, which leads to faster loading time. Also, most CDNs will be make sure that once a user requests a file from it, it will be served from the server closest to them. So which is also leads to a faster loading time. So this is the most important aspect of CDN. So for the purpose, we can use the CDN method in our approach also. Now let's understand the jQuery functions. So first function we are using jQuery is equal to $sign and then function name we have to provide. So dollar and function if I'm considering is used for the ready handler. Then selector we have to pass where we have to consider for the particular point where we are selecting the element, selecting the particular element for the selector impression. Then afterwards elements are to be considered where this jQuery selects HTML elements using CSS selector. Okay, so in that we have to use the element part, and in that directly we can consider the specify the elements. In HTML creation, we can consider this point by using dollar and then HTML. Dollar dot function is basically used, or you can consider to execute a jQuery function. And to create a jQuery function, we can use this particular syntax dollar dot fn dot my function like that. So ready functions we have to use here in a particular jQuery. Then you have to set up a basic HTML page and add the jQuery. So create a ready function, then call a function. So for a calling function, we can consider 5 ways to write it. Any way you can represent in your code. Then we are having a element, selecting the element. So in that we have to select jQuery, means jQuery selects the HTML element in which it is used to change the style of HTML element dynamically. It allows developer to modify properties, and it is without any reloading the page, and which is considered multiple CSS properties can also be applied at the same time. So these are all the selectors we can consider in the jQuery. jQuery syntax, whichever you are considered here. So basic syntax they are considered for the selector dollar selector dot action. So for selecting HTML elements and performing some action on that particular element. So dollar sign is to define, or you can access the jQuery, a selector basically to query or to find the HTML elements, and jQuery action is basically to perform the particular action on that particular element. So this is an example we can consider. If I want to hide the current element, then I can use $this dot hide function. If I want to hide all the paragraph element, then paragraph I can dollar is used for the particular consideration sign for define to access the jQuery, and then hides all the paragraph element. Then if I want to consider hides all the element with the class which is to be written as a test in my code, then it is to be used by with the help of this syntax. If I want to hide the element with the id is equal to test, then I can consider this particular syntax for this particular operation. So we are having id selector, class selector, where we have to consider the each jQuery. If I want to consider a particular function, if I want to operate, then for dot each is iterate over the set. Size is a function which is used to number of elements in the set. Dot n is a function to revert the previous set. Dot get, in that we have to pass the n as a number, then get the nth element of, we can consider 0 base, then we consider the same working as an array. Then dot eq, in that we have to pass the nth element, then get the nth element, and get the only the nth to m minus 1th element, then I can use a slice method. Then don't include p element in a set, then we can use a dot not method. Then dot add we can use to add the paragraph element to set. Then remove all the elements from the page DOM, then we can use the remove method. Then remove the contents of all the elements, then you can directly use the empty method. Then select the element where the function returns true or cell, then we can use directly the filter method. Then we have to consider here the next method which is given for the select the elements meeting the selector criteria. So in that we have to use the find method. Parent method is basically return the parent of each element in the set. Children is basically method used to return all the children of the each element in the set. Next method is basically used to get the next element of each element in the set. Previous method and is used to get the previous element of each element in a set. And sibling is a method to get all the siblings of the current element. So here we are returning our functions in a separate file where I added the jQuery, and in that we can use the function itself. So that function will get called in the script src. Formatting the element which is to be considered here, which is considered for the changing the style, or you can consider creating the element, or you can consider appending the element up, or you can consider removing the element. So basically these are all considered as a formatting element. In that we have to consider the particular formatting. So in the .css we can consider this method, we have to pass the property comma value. So in which basically it is to be considered for particular changing style. So CSS method is in a jQuery is used to change the style in HTML element dynamically. It allows developer to modify properties like color, or we have to use the font size or background without reloading the page. So basically we have to use the CSS method or dynamic styling like that. So the CSS method is used to change the style and background, or you can consider without reloading the particular page. So in which we have to consider the particular element is going to be create. Then we are considering here the append method, appending the element. So append method is used to add new element inside an element, existing element. So in that we can create the append method, or we can consider add content dynamically. Then afterwards we are considering here the remove method, which is used to delete element from the web page. It is completely remove the selected element and its content from the DOM. So this is useful for deleting the unwanted items such as row, message, or form field like that. So I can directly use the remove method or directly the elements from the DOM. So add the element, add page element, in which we have to consider where exactly we want to add this particular target element. So which is to be before, after, append and wrap is a method which is to be used for adding the page element. Then adding the event, basically this is to be considered for event handling in jQuery, allows the web page to respond to user action such as click, or we can consider mouse movement, or we can consider a key press. So method like click, and we can consider here another method as the mouse over, are used to attach the event handlers, and which is used for making the web page interactive. So here we have to consider the keystrokes. We are using the mouse over event like that, bind, hover and toggle. Then we have to use the button click event like that. So here, in which event handling allows the web page to respond to user action, in which making the web page interactive. So commonly used jQuery event methods, we have to consider here dot ready method. Basically, this method allows us to execute a function when a document is fully loaded. This event is already explained in our particular jQuery syntax chapters, which is previously we have discussed. And then afterwards, click method. Basically, this method is used to attach an event handler function to an HTML element, where the function is executed when the user clicks on the particular HTML element, and we have to consider that this particular event is used for a particular paragraph and hide the current element. Then we can use such type of methods for a particular event handling. Double click is also there, which is to be used. This method is attach an event handler function to an HTML element, which executes when the user double clicks on the HTML element. Mouse enter, we have to use mouse enter, where this method is attach the event handling function to HTML element, which consider that mouse pointer enters the HTML element, which executes that particular function. Mouse leave and mouse down and mouse up, these are all the events are used for a particular event handling. The hover is method that takes two functions and is a combination of the mouse event and the mouse leave methods. The first function is executed when the mouse enters the HTML element, and select the function in executed when the mouse leave the HTML element. So this is considered when the alert message is going to be displayed on this particular hover method. Then afterward, this method will be get displayed on this particular execution of the function. So event background, if I want to consider here, then DOM level 2 event model we are adding here for multiple event handlers or listeners can be established on a particular element. So these handlers cannot be relied upon the run or any particular order. When the particular triggering is happening, or you can consider event propagation from the top down or a bottom up approach, then it is to be considered to capture the particular phase where it is to be given, or it doesn't support the capture phase. So these are the basic syntax for event binding, where we have to use the bind method, which function we have to consider for which element that is to be passed to a particular method. So this is basically element properties we are using here for a particular ID, tag name, attribute, source or class name like that. Event properties we have to consider here, which is to be used for refer to element triggering event. Then we have to consider here a particular mouse coordinate properties, keystroke related properties like that in the event properties. Event methods we have to consider here, in which we have to use a particular click event or blur event or focus or select event. So this method doesn't require any parameters. It is invoke the event handlers like triggering a particular point. So for a particular event, it is to be used in a wrap set. And the last one is Ajax. We are not going into depth of a particular point, because just understand this is one of the basic point we have to consider in this particular point, where JQuery provides a simple syntax, faster development, and strong communication support. It is include many plugins that extends the functionality, and due to its simplicity and power, jQuery is widely used in the real world web application. So let's understand what are the advantage of the jQuery. So it is simple syntax, fast development, large community support. Also, it is to be used basically jQuery simplified JavaScript programming, and it's especially helpful for beginners. It allows the developer to create or interactive and dynamic websites with a less efforts. Even today, particular point, if I'm considering jQuery is useful for a quick user interface interactions and legacy system. So basically, there are considering the conclusion point for the jQuery. It is used for simplifies the JavaScript and useful for interactive UI. So jQuery is very easy to learn and help in developing part where interacting where to create interactive web pages effectively. So it is especially useful for beginners and simple projects. So this simple program demonstrates how jQuery is used to show and hide the HTML content dynamically when buttons are clicked. So first method we are consider here the loading the jQuery library. So in this particular line of code, sr script src is equal to, this line loads the jQuery library using CDN. So jQuery must be included before writing any jQuery code. Otherwise the jQuery function will not be work. The next one is called as the HTML structure. So here added the two buttons. In that we had to consider one button to show and another button to hide. Then afterwards I created the content by the help of div ID, in which this content can be shown or hidden using the jQuery is to be written. So in this basically what exactly I have done. So this content can be shown or hidden using the jQuery. So basically two buttons are created, show and hide. A div with ID content contains the text that will be shown or hidden. The ID attributes are used to jQuery to select the elements. And next third one is the CSS styling I have added in that. So in that context, we are considering the styling part. So CSS style the content box by setting its width, background color, padding and border to make it visually clear on the web page. Then next one is document ready functions. I have created here, which is considered from the dollar sign, dollar document ready. So this particular function ensures that the HTML page is fully loaded before before executing an jQuery code. So this prevents error. This prevents error because by accessing the element, this prevent errors caused by the accessing the elements before they are exit. So in that we have created the function document ready function. Next one is hide button functionality. So it is considered here in which hide button functionality I have to consider, which is to be given by dollar. Then in the brackets I consider in the double quotes hash hide button. So in that we have to use this function by a hide button functionality. So when the hide button is clicked, the click event is triggered. The hide function method hides the div with ID content, and the content and the element is removed from view but not deleted from the DOM. So basically when the show button is clicked, the show method is executed and the hidden content becomes visible again. So this happens dynamically without reloading the page. So this is called for the particular function for show button and hide button. Then afterwards, how the program will execute, that I will run the code and I will show you. So overall working of this particular program, in which we have to consider jQuery selects HTML element using IDs. The button click event controls the visibility of the context. So here first of all it will consider in the show button. Then web page becomes interactive by responding to the user actions. When I click on the hide button, it will hide the content, and if I consider the show button, it will show the content. So no page refresh is required for this particular program. So this is a simple explanation of the jQuery I have added in this example, where some questions will be asked you like what does hide function do? So basically the answer is it hides the selected HTML element. And if I'm considering next question is what does show function do? So it displays the hidden element like that. So this is what exactly we are considering here. Why is $document.ready is used? So if the answer for this particular question is to ensure the page loads before executing the jQuery code. So basically that in this particular program, jQuery is used to show and hide the examples. Successfully, we have demonstrated the dynamic DOM manipulation and the event handling using the jQuery method.